Notdeer.
Okay, so since this might be the first time you've heard of this, here's a brief description of Kokuri-san. Kokuri-san is kind of like a type of Japanese Ouija board game, but instead of a board, they use a piece of paper, and instead of a planchette, they use a 10-yen coin. To play, you need 4 things: a piece of paper, a pen, a 10-yen coin, and preferably a table to put the paper on and sit around. Here's how they play. First, on the paper you write yes and no, and between them, drawing a shrine gate. Beneath that you write the Japanese alphabet and numbers. Next, usually 2 to 3 people gather around a table and put the 10-yen coin down on the paper. Everyone puts their index finger on the coin and calls for Kokuri-san. The players call out, "Kokuri-san, Kokuri-san, please come. If you are here, please say yes," and the 10-yen coin will begin to move. Next, just like a Ouija board, you ask the questions you like answered. The coin will move to spell out the answers. Once a single question has been answered, the players ask, "Please return to the shrine gate," and the coin will move towards it. When you want to finish the session, just like with a Ouija board, you must say goodbye. To do this, you say, "Kokuri-san, Kokuri-san, please return now," or "Kokuri-san, Kokuri-san, please go home." Once the coin moves to yes, and then returns to the shrine gate, all the players finish by saying thank you, and the game is over. So it's very much like a Ouija board, but according to the instructions, the alphabet must be written out in the Japanese alphabet. I don't know whether or not it would work with English. It's generally popular amongst junior high school students and some elementary school students. I'm not sure of the popularity now, but it's still well known here in Japan. And now, on to the stories. Immediately after lunch, several girls started playing Kokuri-san. At first, I just thought, what a stupid thing to do again. But as they asked 1 or 2 questions, I gradually started to feel short of breath. After about 5 minutes, I was so tired that my eyes were blurred, and I thought, this is bad, and I left the classroom to go to the nurse's office. At the time, my senior was a second-year student. The classroom was on the 3rd floor, and the nurse's office was on the 1st floor. Feeling indescribably sick, I finally made my way down to the 2nd floor, and suddenly, the shortness of breath I had been feeling up until then was gone, as if it had never happened. I went back to the 3rd floor, wondering, what is this? And the moment I stepped into the classroom, I was hit with a severe headache and shortness of breath that was incomparable to the one I had felt before. When I saw the girls playing Kokuri-san, at the moment I collapsed, I was so scared and in such pain that I screamed out loud. The girl was so startled by the voice that she removed her finger from the 10-yen coin, and the shortness of breath disappeared immediately. But she was so frightened by what she had just seen that she couldn't stand up for a while. By the way, after that, 2 of the 4 or 5 senior girls were injured and taken away in an ambulance. Also, when the senior collapsed, she saw a girl with abnormally long hair covered in blood peering at the desk where the girl's fingertips were gathered. I've been doing karate since elementary school, and I was an instructor for the children's division for students under the 6th grade. in high school and college. During a summer camp in my second year of high school, the students were making a lot of noise in the middle of the night. When I went to tell them off, saying, "Are you still up? You have to get up early tomorrow. What a bunch of idiots," I found out that it was the girls' room that was making all the noise, and more than half of the 15 or so girls were crying. When I asked, "What on earth is going on?" I found out that Ayumi, 6th grade, had asked to play Kokuri-san at bedtime. At that time, despite Benny, 4th grade, pleading, "No, let's stop this," Ayumi started playing with some other students. As they continued asking questions, the window started to vibrate and rattle, even though there was no wind. They all looked at the window, and at that moment, hands started to move all over the window. Benny fainted, and Ayumi was in a state of confusion, flailing her arms and legs, shouting, "There's something strange here." It was so scary, they couldn't go and call us, and they were in a complete panic. I don't have any psychic powers, and since it's my second year as an instructor, I didn't know what to do. So I went to call the teacher anyway. The teacher encouraged Benny, called all the students into the gym and said, "You don't have enough spirit, so the spirits will come. Let's start with 1,000 straight punches." At around 11 p.m, the children from 1st grade to 6th grade rubbed their sleepy eyes and started shouting, "Come on, come on, 1,000 punches." Needless to say, by the time we finished, everyone was exhausted and went back to their rooms and fell into a deep sleep. When the sensei and I returned to the room, he silently handed me a cup of sake and said, "Didn't you see the many people outside the room? Dozens of them were gathered at the windows of the gym. I tried it out of spite, but I'm really glad it worked." So, this sensei could see them. This story is a little scary to write, because there are so many taboos about it. I think I had psychic powers when I was a child. I say I think I had psychic powers because when I think back on all my spiritual experiences now, I start to doubt whether they really happened. But this one thing I remember clearly as something that really happened. After all, my friend was in a traffic accident. It was when we were playing Kokuri-san. The atmosphere was lively, with the curiosity typical of elementary school students. But the 10-yen coin only moved slightly. It never moved smoothly, but moved slowly, so I could barely ask a yes or no question. Still, it must have been scary for my timid friend, and he took his finger off before saying, "Please go home," to Kokuri-san. We started saying "please go home" right there, saying that we would be cursed, and finished Kokuri-san. However, that day after school, that friend was hit by a car. I was on my way to the pool with another friend, and was horrified to see my friend lying on the road. Fortunately, my friend's injuries were minor, just a fracture, but according to a child who was at the scene, he ran out into the road even though he knew the car was coming. And my friend who had the accident said some incomprehensible things like, "I felt like my mother was calling me, so I thought it was bad." But we were elementary school students. We were having fun and asked, "Shall we ask Kokuri-san if it was angry because that child let go of the coin?" And we talked about playing Kokuri-san again. However, when our homeroom teacher heard us, he scolded us with terrible anger, so we called off the Kokuri-san. "You can't play Kokuri-san just for fun." We nodded obediently. But it was so bad that we asked the homeroom teacher later why. He said that he had also incurred the wrath of Kokuri-san before. This is a story from when the teacher was in high school. The teacher, who was a member of the volleyball club, apparently decided to play Kokuri-san in earnest after club activities were over. There were 4 of them. They had properly researched everything from the direction to all the rest of it. The Kokuri-san moved the 10 yen coin smoothly and, to everyone's surprise, answered simple questions like who likes who. The members got carried away and asked, "Finally, please tell us the name of the Kokuri-san." The 10 yen coin started to move and spell out sushi and ko. The members laughed at the name. As expected, the Kokuri-san got angry. His fingers wouldn't let go of the 10 yen coin, and the club room doors wouldn't open, so they were in a state of panic. They cried and apologized for about 3 hours. I guess it was a kind spirit to begin with. Then, the Kokuri-san finally said, "I'll forgive you if you come to the big tree and apologize," and released everyone. But the members didn't go to apologize because it was scary. Kokuri-san is not something you should play around with after all. Oh, and I just remembered. This music teacher married an art teacher at work while we were in school. It was a shotgun marriage, so I hated the idea of them doing something while teaching us. The child they gave birth to was born with complications. This is from when I was in the 2nd year of junior high school. For some reason, Kokuri-san was popular at the school I went to. It was me and the guys in my class who played it, and whenever we had time, like during breaks or after school, we would play Kokuri-san with different members. We tried using pens instead of just 10 yen coins, and in a normal school, we would probably get scolded by teachers or adults with some knowledge of that sort of thing if they saw us. But since the school I went to was an American school, I think the teachers probably thought, well, it's okay. It's just a game that's popular at the moment anyway. Although we were scolded by Japanese teachers. In America, there is something like Western Kokuri-san, which is played using a Ouija board. So my foreign friends, who knew about it through their parents, and the other kids who knew about it, definitely didn't play Kokuri-san, even when I invited them. But I was a brat, and my half-Japanese friends had information about both cultures, so we thought, it's just a superstition. It's like an urban legend. If a friend who doesn't speak Japanese does it with a 10 yen coin, will a Japanese spirit come? Then you can't have a spiritual connection. On the other hand, what if a Japanese spirit comes with a Ouija board? Do they speak in English? And we did it as a game. My friends, including myself, were like, well, if the 10 yen coin moves, we're lucky. I and my friends who play with me are scared, but we don't have any psychic powers or anything. And even if the 10 yen coin moves, even a little, we had a weird realist side to us, thinking, maybe someone is unconsciously moving it. So one day I decided to invite my friends, Shota and Jun, who were both in a year below me. These two self-proclaimed to have psychic powers, and Shota in particular had a strong psychic power in his family, and I often heard people say that they had spiritual experiences since they were young. Since it was a self-proclaimed experience, I don't know how much of it was true, but I thought it would create a better atmosphere. I have never had a spiritual experience, and I hoped that maybe some strange phenomena would occur, so I decided to try it after school. I can't remember if it was autumn or spring, but I'm sure it was at the end of the term, and even though it was after school, most students went home after their tests, so only us and a few other people who were seriously doing their homework were left at school. I think it was around 3 o'clock. we decided to play Kokori-san in the classroom next to the students who were doing their homework, just in case something happened. When we decided to play, Shota said, "I don't want to look at the paper directly because I'm scared." I replied, "So what are we going to do?" Shota said, "I'll put my finger on the 10-yen coin and never let it go. Can I just keep my face down?" Jun and I agreed. "Yeah, sure, but please don't let it go." And so, we started playing Kokori-san. After saying the usual questions, the 10-yen coin did move. Oh, Shota probably doesn't know because his face is down, but Jun must be unconsciously moving it. After all, that kid claims to have psychic powers, and I thought, so this Kokori-san failed too, and I asked it a lot of questions. I don't remember exactly, but I think the spirit that descended was a Chinese spirit who died when he was a child. Jun seriously said, "Poor thing, he died when he was little," and asked me for my agreement. I was bored, so I thought, maybe it's time for him to go home. "Kokori-san, Kokori-san, please go home." The 10-yen coin didn't move at all. It had been moving smoothly up until then, so I was a little worried about why it had stopped moving now. I thought Jun had moved it anyway, so I asked Jun, "Do you not want to go home?" in a deliberately urging manner. And Jun, unable to hide his impatience, asked me back, "Hey, why?" Anyway, I asked it to go home again. Then, the 10-yen coin moved smoothly to the no side. We, me and Jun, were scared and desperately asking it to go home, but the 10-yen coin did not move. I started to think that this might be dangerous. Then I noticed something. Shota had not spoken since he started playing Kokori-san. It's partly because he is not looking at the paper and has his face down, but he must be able to hear the conversation. I thought that perhaps he had fallen asleep and that he should wake up because it's a bit dangerous right now, so I shook him. But Shota did not wake up as if he was asleep. His finger was still in the 10-yen coin. I panicked a little and said, "Kokori-san, Kokori-san, what can I do to get you to go home?" Then, the 10-yen coin that had not moved from no started to move. I followed it with my eyes as it was going to the na row. This is bad. It might write shine, which is die in Japanese. I can't take it. Fear took over, and I didn't want to move the 10-yen coin for now. Oh no, I thought, but I was on the verge of weeping. Shota didn't seem to understand the situation, so we tried desperately to wake him up with our fingers still on it. However, Shota didn't say a word. Just as we were thinking what to do, like, should we call an adult, Shota suddenly started laughing. He did so, and didn't change his position. Our fear had reached its limit, so he left Shota and ran away, screaming from the classroom. Then, half crying, we ran into the classroom next door where the students were doing their homework. We found the face of our male friend among the students doing their homework and told him what had happened so far. "That's so stupid," he said, half laughing, and came with me to the classroom where we were playing Kokori-san. But when he saw Shota still laughing alone in the classroom, he also turned pale. First, he shook Shota, but he still didn't wake up. So he slapped Shota back and forth in the face. Then, Shota said, "What?" Jun and I, who are cowards and have no friends, watched what was happening from the doorway. When I asked Shota about the situation, he said, I remember that I started playing Kokuri-san, but I don't remember anything after that. I didn't see any ghosts or experience any strange phenomena like in horror movies, but at that time, I really thought I was going to die. After that, we had to decide on how to dispose of the paper we used for Kokuri-san, what to do with the 10-yen coin, and so on. This was something that another friend who later took care of that, and then Shota experienced. I didn't have any spiritual problems after that, so I'll leave it out. The conclusion is that the next day, half of the students who took their final exam in the classroom where we played Kokuri-san felt sick, so the exam was unusually scheduled to be held again on another day. After that, the vice principal called me and told me to stay home for 3 days. He said, "You probably know the reason," and didn't mention the reason for the suspension. That's all. Sorry for the long story. This experience happened to me while camping in the wilderness of eastern Washington, near the Canadian border. 2 friends and myself were sitting around the campfire. We were camped on a large flat about midway up a mountain we were hiking. All of a sudden we heard a strange screaming noise. The screams were shrill and came in consecutive 1 to 2 second bursts. Here's my attempt at describing the noise onomatopoeically. Ah, 1 second beat. Ah, 1 second beat. Ah. The noise was getting closer, and I asked my more wilderness-experienced friend if it could possibly be a predator. I know mountain cats can make screaming noises. He said he didn't think so, but we grabbed our rifles. The noise is getting closer, and we can see an animal coming towards us, straight up the fairly steep grade of the mountain at a fast pace. I would clock the speed at 25 miles per hour easily. It was about the speed of someone on a motorbike going at a fast rate. We grabbed our rifles and took aim as the animal bolted straight towards our campsite. But what we saw next was not a predator. It was a deer, bounding in huge leaps, screaming entirely on its hind legs. The deer was hopping like a pogo stick with its forelegs held in front of it. The look of pure terror in its eyes reflected in the firelight will haunt me forever. I've looked for video of deers on their hind legs, and such behavior I've only ever seen deers getting food out of trees, or possibly fighting another deer on their hind legs. My friends joke and say the deer got into some bad mushrooms, but it was truly the strangest experience of my life. I figured I'd post this here to get some thoughts after I've terrified my wife. I want to preface this that I have hunted and hiked in the region since I was 9 years old. I am very familiar with the wildlife and the sounds of the forest. I'm not really a believer in any sort of thing, but I don't really have an explanation for what happened here tonight. I hiked about 1.5 miles through forest and swamp hunting deer today, and I got to the pocket of woods and field that I wanted to be in and climbed a tree to hunt out of it. By all accounts, this was an uneventful afternoon and evening until sundown. For about 30 minutes, I listened to a rabbit be tortured and just wouldn't die. If you've heard a dog or a hawk get a rabbit or 100 rabbits, you know what I'm talking about. When they are distressed, they scream bloody murder. And this just seemed to continue forever. Naturally, this can make you on edge, but I figured a hawk got it and just wasn't killing it. Then, the sound of a twig snapping in silence the rabbit stopped. Through the thicket, I could make out a figure, vaguely deer-shaped, moving through the woods about 35 yards away, so I grabbed my bow. But the undergrowth is far too thick for me to pick out much more than a rough outline. It walked behind a tree and disappeared. The sun is now fully set, and I am in the last 15 minutes of post-sundown light, and I hear, in a flat, emotionless child's voice coming from where that deer disappeared. Help, help, help. No fluctuation or distress to the voice. Not said as if it was asking for help, just a statement. Help, help, help. It said that probably 15 times. And then the woods went silent. There wasn't even a breeze to make a sound. Then a crack of a limb of a tree snapping, and all hell broke loose in the woods. Squirrels, birds, and deer suddenly shot out of these woods like bats out of hell, sounding like an absolute stampede through the forest. And then, silence again. To make things worse for me, I lost my hat-clipped light on my walk in, and had to haul my ass 1.5 miles through the woods back to my truck, in darkness. My path only lit by tonight's full moon. I went back to the woods this morning. Last night, after getting back to my truck, I called a few friends to let them know what happened, and then had a relatively sleepless night. This morning I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I decided that I needed to return. I grabbed my hunting dog, called up a buddy to come with, and set out, back to those woods. First I drove around the property. Nobody was parked at any trailhead, so there shouldn't be anyone around. We took a long way around, heading north to get to the woods, a few miles from the parking area, stopping to talk, look for animal sign, and to listen as we go. We approached the woods from the south, keeping on the outside of it, in a tall, grassy wet field. As we approached within 200 or so yards of where I heard it last night, we stopped to talk for a moment and plan how to best go about entering the woods. This isn't some manicured forest that's easy walking. The undergrowth is dense and filled with thorny shrubs and blackthorn. Whereas yesterday and in weeks past, this area was teeming with life. Deer, pheasants, hundreds of turkeys and their poults, crows, squirrels, and rabbits. Today, this woods and fields were completely silent. As we discussed this, I realized my dog was nowhere to be seen or heard. She normally wears a bell, or the metal pieces of her collar are sufficient for me to hear where she is. It is silent. She wears an e-collar that I can press a button and it will make a beeping noise I can hear. I press that button, and silence. I yelled for her, and silence. Then, coming from the forest ahead of me, I hear the yelping of my dog in pain. Loud and clearly my dog. I look at my friend and take off towards the woods, calling and beeping the collar, and waiting. Back to silence. I look at my buddy, and he asks, "What are you doing?" As if he hadn't heard it. We stop and wait for a moment, on the edge of the woods. I call one more time, and finally hear the jingle of her collar, coming up to me, completely unharmed, from the opposite direction of where I thought I heard her crying. Confused, we distance ourselves from the woods again, and continue north along the edge. Again, we neither heard or saw any wildlife. We found a few spots where things were recently killed, staining the ground with rotted blood, but no signs of anything living. Eventually, we turned back, and as we crossed the same spot I thought I heard my dog, My friend stopped, looked at me in a panic and said, "Oh shit, your dog," and took off running into the woods. I called after him, asking what he was doing, and he said he heard her clearly crying in pain in the woods, and was confused when I said I heard nothing, just the same as when we first walked by, and I was the one who heard it. I could see my dog in the opposite direction, smelling around, totally unharmed. I called to my friend that the dog is fine and was over by me, and we rushed out. For those who might ask what else it may be, I have heard my dog yelping before. That was it. It doesn't sound anything like coyotes or wolves. I won't be returning to that area again. I live in Florida, out in the country. There's about 500 acres of wooded area around my house, with some clearings for other houses and cows. While we live fairly close to the main road, it's far enough back that we don't hear traffic, and maybe a 15-minute drive to the closest store. We see a lot of wildlife in our yard, which is only about 5 acres that we own. There are wild turkeys, armadillos, coyotes, and of course, the deer. The plot we live on used to be an old grape farm, so there are a ton of ridges in the ground that used to be used to grow grapes. There's a herd of about 7 to 13 does and fawns that love to sleep in these ridges and eat the gardenias in the morning. We usually leave them alone and don't let our dogs or chickens out until they're gone. A few months back, I'd gotten into the habit of waking up early enough to drink my coffee on the back porch and watch the deer. They were usually most active around dawn after they woke up. After a while, I had noticed one that seemed like it would stare at the house very intensely, even when I was not outside. I would be in our computer room at the back of the house and feel eyes on me, only to look out the window and see this one specific deer staring down the house, but not from one eye, from both, like it was looking down its nose at us. My mum would see it too, and it gave us the creeps. One morning after I had thought the deer had left, I let my dog out, a big black dog who'd roll over and try and play with a toad. He's very non-confrontational, but loves to chase birds and deer. If they don't move, he becomes disinterested because they're not playing with him. Our chickens just ignore him or flock around our small livestock dog. When I let him out, he spotted the deer and ran straight towards them, only to stop in his tracks 100 feet from them and tuck his tail. I looked, and the odd deer was staring him down, once again from its nose. I called him back and he came and hid behind my legs. I looked at the deer, which had turned to look at me, and noticed that it was not a normal deer. Its eyes seemed a little too big for its head, and its body just didn't seem proportional. It was a great mimic of a deer if you didn't look closely. But I had seen a lot of deer, and this just wasn't one. It looked almost as if a deer had put on a deerskin over itself. It just didn't fit right. Anyways, we had begun the new habit of closing the blinds in the morning and waiting until the sun was higher in the sky to let the dogs out. And eventually, construction began after about 100 acres right next to us was sold. We haven't seen any deer since the trees had been mostly cleared out, and I think it's for the better. Creepy hunting encounter. I once held a hunting lease in Middle Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place I've ever been. I used to hunt there by myself a lot, and there was always this weird sense that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it was not uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. That was pretty creepy, but that's not what this story is about. One evening I was hunting down a small valley by a food plot we put, lining a creek that bordered the property. From the minute I sat down, I had a weird feeling, like I wasn't in a safe place, even though I was holding a .308 with ballistic tipped rounds. I didn't feel like I was the top predator out there. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting in the stand, but the forest was abuzz with activity. Birds, squirrels, and other critters singing their normal evening symphony. And then, all of a sudden, silence. Everything just stopped. It felt like everything in the woods were looking right at me. It was getting dark fast anyways, and I was extremely creeped out. So I packed up my gear and started the walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, I had this feeling that something was coming up behind me. I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the path towards the food plot. And that's when I saw it. There was something standing in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything I've seen before. There was hardly any light to make out any features, but it almost looked like some kind of bipedal deer or something. It was just standing there, staring at me. I quickly made my way back to the cabin, packed up my stuff, and got out of there. I just let the lease run out. Never went back there after that. I've always loved the quiet solitude of my small cabin, nestled deep in the woods of northern Michigan. The towering pines and silent lakes create a vast, serene world, away from bustling city life. It's the kind of place where you can almost hear your own thoughts echoing back at you. The wildlife is just as you'd expect in these parts. Deer, bears, and coyotes roam freely, living their lives on the periphery of mine. I often sit on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the deer graze in the clearing. They're majestic creatures, moving with a grace that seems almost unnatural. There's a particular group that regularly visits, about 5 or 6 of them, and there was always one in particular that caught my interest. It stood a little apart. Its gaze always seemed to linger on the cabin longer than the others. One foggy morning as dawn broke over the trees, I heard a commotion from the woods. It was the sound of deer, but something was off. I stepped out onto the porch to see the deer standing in the clearing. But that one deer, its eyes were locked onto mine. This time, its stance was different, almost human-like in its deliberation. It was uncanny, like it understood more than it should. As I stared back, time seemed to slow. It began to move, not in the bounding leaps of a startled animal, but in a slow, deliberate stride, its hooves barely making a sound on the ground. I felt a shiver run down my spine as it came closer, its gaze never breaking. Unease washed over me, a primal fear I couldn't explain. I stepped back inside, shut the door and watched it through the window. It stopped at the edge of the clearing, standing still as if waiting. Then, in an instant, the forest erupted with sounds. Birds took flight, squirrels scattered, and for a moment, it was chaos. When I looked back, the deer was gone, vanished, as if it had never been there. That night, I heard the forest alive with unfamiliar sounds. The underbrush rustled as if something was moving through it with purpose. Something more than an animal. Sleep was elusive, and I felt as if the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something to unfold. I haven't seen that particular deer since then. The visits from the deer have become less frequent. After that weird encounter, I still get a little jumpy whenever I'm close to the woods. So this happened last November. My husband and I recently retired and moved into our own new place, which backs right up against some pretty dense woods. I was outside one day, getting the backyard ready for winter, when I started feeling like someone was watching me. I figured it was just the solitude playing tricks on me, so I tried to ignore it. But then, I saw some movement over by the edge of the woods. At first I was like, oh, it's just a deer, which we see all the time around here. But then it started looking weird. Like, really weird. Its legs were way too long, bending in all the wrong places, and its neck seemed twisted. Honestly, it kind of made my skin crawl. This thing just stood there, staring at me, not moving an inch. At first I was curious, but that quickly turned into real dread, especially because it wasn't acting like a normal animal. Usually they'd run off if they saw you, but not this one. So naturally I decided to walk towards it, although I don't know what I was thinking. But the deer didn't move. I noticed that the air felt heavy, and everything went silent around us. No bugs, no birds, no rustle in the leaves, nothing. After what felt like forever, it just turned around and walked back into the woods, like nothing happened. It was creepy how elegant it moved, despite how weird it looked. Afterwards, I went online to figure out what I just saw, and there are loads of stories about sightings pretty much like my own. Since then, the woods feel different to me. I can't go out there without thinking about it. The sounds are the same, but now they somehow feel off. I sometimes find myself looking out into the woods, half hoping I'll see it again, but also hoping I don't, because honestly, it just freaked me out. I still can't stop wondering what it was all about, though. Why did I see it? What did it want? Or am I just overthinking things? Hospitals are often at the top of the list of places where spooky stories are treated with respect. The main reason for this is that hospitals are places where people die almost every other day. During the SARS period, a friend of mine was working in a ward that harbored all the confirmed cases, which they referred to as the probable. She said strange occurrences, like dark shadows or feeling of presence, became the norm. Personally, I've always felt spooked looking at those lonely corridors with dark rooms that resemble storerooms or something equally eerie if you were to look inside. I heard that one good indication of their presence is when things get misplaced or disappear, only to reappear in unlikely locations. I've heard cleaners talk about meeting rooms being completely messed up, even though they hadn't been used for a while and had been locked all the time. One of my friends is a nurse who works the night shift. Night nurses have to make their rounds every couple of hours to ensure everything is okay. In her hospital, it was famously reported that on a certain level, at a specific corner, when walking along the corridor, a faint Buddhist chanting would fill the air. There were also stories about call bells being sounded repeatedly, even though the bed wasn't occupied. Personally, I admire the courage of those nurses who have to face the unknown in the wee hours. Do you have the same courage as them? This story I'm about to narrate is an incident that occurred to me. I am a staff member at National University Hospital in Singapore. As many of us know, there is a linkway that connects the main building and Kent Ridge Wing. This linkway is located on level 2. The level 2 linkway is used for moving patients, and this is how everything started. It was a weekend. The time was 5:15 p.m. I was instructed to complete a task that was assigned to me by my controller. I had to dispatch 14 case notes. Therefore, I went to the medical record office located at Kent Ridge Wing. I was pushing the trolley towards the linkway. Suddenly, the door at lift lobby 8 opened and closed several times. I sensed that something was wrong. As I pushed the trolley faster, I could hear a lot of footsteps around me. However, I was the only person at that level. I closed my eyes for several seconds. As I took small steps towards the entrance of the main building, I saw a white figure moving across the staircase towards the histopathology lab. The next thing I knew, I was dumbstruck. I called my controller and asked her to assign the job to another porter. I left the trolley outside the Department of Diagnostic Imaging. The following week, I decided to investigate the hospital. That's when my colleague told me that during the 90s, the histopathology lab used to be a place where they did post-mortem work. They used the cadaver's body parts for research and experiments. However, they demolished the area and converted it into a histopathology lab. It is said that the spirit is lurking in that area and has been there for a very, very long time, trying to find its body that was once used for medical experiments. Sometime back, I was injured while playing soccer and my hamstring was practically torn apart. As a result, I was admitted to a hospital. In my ward, there were 6 beds, 3 in each of the 2 rows. I was in one of the middle beds, so there was a bed on each side of me. The bed on the left was empty, and the other was occupied by a Caucasian man. On the first night, I remember sleeping at around 10 p.m. after my girlfriend left. It was about midnight when I suddenly woke up and noticed a Malay guy, my age, lying in the bed that used to be empty. I was quite surprised since I knew no one would typically be admitted to a hospital in the middle of the night, except for emergency cases, and my ward was certainly not meant for emergencies. However, being the rational person I am, I didn't think of anything supernatural. Instead, I assumed maybe he wasn't satisfied with the bed he was in before and wanted to transfer to this one. I thought to myself, finally, in a ward of old men, I've got someone to chat with tomorrow, since he was my age and race. So feeling happy, I went back to sleep. The next morning, I found that the bed was empty. I asked a nurse who the person sleeping next to me was the previous night, and guess what? She said no one had been there. I could hardly believe it. The Caucasian man next to me, who had been quiet all along, said that just a day before I came, a Malay guy had been in that bed next to mine. because of a bike accident, and that he died that very day. To this day, I don't know what to make of it. I reassure myself that it was just pure coincidence, that I was dreaming about a Malay guy in the bed next to mine. But somehow, it just can't be. It begins with curiosity. After all, so many tales have been spoken about the old Changi hospital. I had gone there twice. During the first trip, together with my cousins, we saw nothing but a lot of curious people like us. In fact, the crowd was so overwhelming that 2 SAF soldiers came and asked the crowd to vacate the premises, as it was supposed to be a restricted area. However, I was not satisfied with the first trip. After a couple of months, I decided to check out the place again. This time I asked my friend to come along. Since there were only 2 of us, we decided to have our supper in Changi village before heading to the spot. After supper, we drove to the spot. I began to share with him about the crowds on my last trip. Half expecting the crowds, I turned into the gentle slope road leading us to Old Changi Hospital. As the road was not well lit, I decided to turn on the high beam. We saw a road sweeper in the distance. It was an old man sweeping by the side of the road. Interestingly, he did not react to our headlights. He kept his head down all the while. When we reached the dead end, which is the old hospital emergency department, it was dark and quiet. There was not a single soul. I was kind of surprised. Thinking that it was not wise to venture out, we decided to leave. As we turned back to the only road that would lead us back to the main road, we saw the old man again. As usual, he did not seem bothered by our presence and the car's high beam. My friend and I jokingly said, maybe we should check him out to see if he was human or a ghost. But we lacked the courage to stop the car and check him out. When we were on the well-lit main road, a couple of questions came to mind. 1. Why would an old man sweep the road at this hour, around 10:30 p.m., on a dark stretch of road without any street lamps? 2. Can a normal person see under those conditions? And 3. Normally, a cleaner wears a luminous reflective vest, but he wore none. This incident occurred last year during my friend's final night at SGH. It's a true story that still sends shivers down my spine. Around 11 p.m, she was supposed to restock some supplies for the next day, so she took a trolley with her. While collecting the items, she noticed a woman in black with blonde hair waving at her. Surprised, since there were no visitors allowed at that time, she decided to walk away. Upon returning to the nursery, the staff nurse remarked on how pale she looked, but my friend just dismissed it. At 2 a.m, the staff nurse asked her to retrieve 2 babies from rooms 21 and 17. As she approached, she saw the same blonde woman standing at the counter, conversing with the staff nurse. Shocked but composed, she proceeded to the rooms, collected the babies, and noticed the blonde woman following her. Increasing her pace, she swiftly returned to the nursery. Once inside, the blonde woman smiled at her and walked away within minutes. Curiously, my friend asked the staff nurse about the woman, only to learn that she claimed to have visited her sister in room 13 and had asked for directions to the restroom. This news floored my friend, as there was no one in room 13. Intrigued and uneasy, they all decided to check the restroom. Upon entering, they discovered a locked cubicle and waited outside. When they re-entered, they found a pool of blood at the sink, and the eerie smile of the blonde woman behind them. I remember this incident vividly despite it happening when I was still a kid. In fact, most of my memories relating back to my childhood are fuzzy, and I can't remember much about it, such as my primary school days. I was admitted to KK Hospital and was warded in one of those wards with animals painted on the walls. Beside me was a child who was hooked up to several tubes and was always looking towards my side. Regrettably, I would often draw the curtains to hide myself away from others, including her. This is an action that I regret to this day, seeing as how that action of mine possibly denied her the chance of seeing the outside world. I was young and didn't really know what was actually going on with me, except that it was really serious. I was suffering from asthma then and was suspected to have a hole in the heart. My parents were extremely worried and would often take turns staying in the hospital to be by my side. It so happened one night that I suffered from an asthma attack, and luckily I survived that ordeal. However, what I remember most from that ordeal is not the effect it had on my body, but rather the dreamlike sequence I had. In my dream then, I was at the lobby of the hospital, the same place I remembered from the years when I was warded. People would often handle their administrative tasks or collect their medicine from there, if I'm not wrong. In my dream, I was around that area and wandering around when I chanced upon a person in a wheelchair. That person in the wheelchair was beckoning me to go over to him. He was wearing a hood over his face, and I couldn't make out his face. All I knew was that he was draped in a navy blue overall with a hood as well. Thinking back, I guess I was lucky that I rejected his advance and walked away, as the incident that stood out the most for me in this dream was that I actually saw the initials indicated on one side of the wheelchair. S-A-T-A-N. God knows what would have happened if I had have walked towards that figure in my dreams back then. This is a true story. It gave me the creeps too. My aunt from Kuala Lumpur, who works in a maternity hospital, shared it with me. She usually works night shifts, and as we all know, hospitals can be pretty spooky at night. Lots of things happen that only some people notice. One normal working night, my aunt reached her ward on time and was at her desk, doing her usual duties. Then, she was asked to send some files up to the 5th floor for immediate action. Not knowing what awaited her, she went to the 5th floor alone by lift. At the 3rd floor, the lift opened and a child came running in, playing and laughing like little kids do. My aunt got off at the 5th floor and did her job. After she was done, she took the lift back down. It was only when she was back with her friends that it hit her. What was a young child doing on the 3rd floor, which is a nursery or daycare area, in the middle of the night? That realization gave her goosebumps. After that day, she never went alone. In fact, all the nurses always go in pairs in the lifts. Scary, huh? P.S. My aunt became ill the next day for several days with a high fever for no particular reason. Apparently, it's said that nurses wear their caps for protection, especially those working at night, because they won't be disturbed if they wear them. That's what I've heard. This is a true story that was related to me by a colleague of mine, who is now working at the same company as I am. As she does not wish to discuss the matter anymore, I hereby wish to express her fear to all, and to hope that everyone will take this as a lesson and stop visiting these places. I believe that we all share the same opinion about the name Old Changi Hospital, that the place is haunted. I believe that the name has risen in popularity over the years because many different people have different stories to relate about their past experiences there. Personally, to be honest with all of you, I myself have gone to that place to explore, not once, not twice, but many times, certainly out of curiosity. Luckily for me, I did not have any encounters with them. Initially, when my friends suggested visiting that place, I thought it was just another location that was uninhabited, where people start creating stories about seeing ghosts. But the moment I saw the building in the distance, the hairs on my arms were already standing on end. The closer I got, the scarier it became. All the girls we brought along were clutching the hands of the males, constantly tugging and urging us to turn back. But the more they tugged, the more determined we all became. And, not long after, we found ourselves at the entrance. The entire building was engulfed in darkness, and I could feel my adrenaline rushing. The feeling was indescribable, unless you were there to experience it yourself. Finally, due to the horrific sight and overwhelming fear, we turned back and headed towards the bus stop. That was a personal experience, and now I am about to start the story that occurred with my friend. My friend, a Malay female who is turning 28 this year. Her name is Siti. This incident happened a long time ago when she was only 16. That was when Old Changi Hospital was still functioning. On that fateful night, she decided to visit her friend who was admitted to the hospital. Accompanying her were two of her other friends, both female. As all of them were feeling lazy, they decided to take a shortcut on the side of the building facing the car park. It was a flight of stairs leading to the second story of the building. Due to the silence and isolation that surrounded the region, few people dared to use that staircase. As they were about to climb the stairs, something caught my friend's eye. She turned around and, to her horror, she saw a white figure hanging on a tree situated nearby. It was white. Long hair was spreading outwards. She could not see its face because the back was facing her. She was dumbfounded, her legs rooted to the ground. She could not move but kept staring at it. One of her friends saw it and fainted on the spot, while the other, who still had the presence of mind to understand what was happening, rushed up and called a few male friends who were already there to come down. By the time they arrived, that figure was already nowhere in sight. But my friend Siti was still in a daze, her eyes still fixed on the tree. And here's the funny part. She actually peed into her pants. It took some time for her to regain her senses, and when she finally came around, she realized that her friends were shaking her vigorously before she broke down into tears. The guys kept asking what had happened, but I guess only the three ladies know for sure. The reason I am telling all of you this is in the hope that you will learn a lesson from other people's experiences, especially those who are mischievous. Never let your curiosity get the better of you, because curiosity killed the cat. You might not know that you could be the next victim. It's best to keep away from them, and they won't come to harass you. At the age of 9, I was frequently admitted as an asthma patient at the old Tan Tock Seng Hospital. I became familiar with each nurse and doctor who treated me during my stays. I was usually admitted to a particular ward, Ward 42 on the second floor of the ward block. right at the end, situated beside a garden. As it was a children's ward, there was only one toilet, and it had to be kept locked to prevent potential floods from burst pipes, thanks to us mischievous kids. To use it, we had to get the key from the nurse's station at the entrance to the ward. A nurse would accompany us to lock the toilet afterward. One night, unable to hold it any longer, I took the toilet key from its box without asking the nurse's permission, as there was no nurse present at the station. As I struggled to unlock the toilet door, I felt someone behind me. I turned around to see a nurse I had never met before. She looked exceptionally radiant and asked, "Do you need any help with that?" I hurriedly handed her the key, and she waited until I finished. She locked the toilet afterward, which was normal, but then she handed the key back to me, instructing me to return it. This was strange since the nurse would typically return it herself. She smiled at me and opened a door leading to a staircase beside the toilet. As far as I knew, that door was always locked, but she opened it anyway. After returning the key, I went back to sleep. The next day, I recounted the incident to a nurse who explained that she and her 2 colleagues were busy attending to a newly admitted girl the previous night. There could have been no other nurse in the ward besides them. So, who was that nurse I met? During my psychiatry rotation as an intern, I was on duty with one resident. Around 3 a.m. I was in my call room, located on the mezzanine of the psych wards, when I heard loud footsteps ascending the mezzanine and moving around just outside my door. I initially ignored it, but after a while, the footsteps descended noisily. This happened a few more times, about 3 times in total. By the 3rd instance, I was starting to get annoyed because I was trying to finish my census. Thinking it might be the resident on duty, I called out, "Doctor, is that you?" There was no response, so I ventured out to explore the entire mezzanine area. Finding no one there, I went down to the main wards and asked the guard stationed just outside the mezzanine door if the resident had gone up. The guard simply looked at me and said, "Sorry, doctor. No one has gone up to your call room since 10 p.m. You were the last one to enter. The doctor returned to his room before you did." Concerned that a psychiatry patient might have sneaked out, I checked, but all the patients were present and accounted for. By then I was feeling panicked, and the nurses were already discussing what I had heard. Ultimately, I left the area and begged the orthopedics department to let me sleep in their call room. Needless to say, I never returned alone to the psychiatry department's mezzanine area. This incident happened when a group of friends and I decided to check out the old Changi hospital. When we reached there, I decided to turn off my phone for who knows what reason. Well, I did, and after about an hour's worth of unsuccessful exploring, we decided to leave. It was already around 11:30 at night by then. We took the bus and ended up relaxing at Tampine's Central Park. I turned my phone back on, and there was one new voice message. I accessed my mailbox, wondering who was the one who had left me a voice message. What I heard on the message really freaked me out. It was a lady speaking in a very raspy voice in Malay. "You get out of here now. Don't disturb me." And in the background was the sound of a baby crying. I checked the time the message was sent, and it was 11:10 p.m.
about the same time we passed by the maternity wards. Pretty weird, but I guess if you want to try it out for yourself, you could. Just sign up for the outing and turn off your phone. This happened to my Malay colleague who went ghost hunting with her significant other and his friends at Old Changi Hospital during the 7th month. They were walking to a bench when her SO's friend decided to take out his mobile phone to film them, hoping to capture an image of a ghost. When they approached the bench, my friend and her SO sat down. They were all playing around and joking, saying, "How come no ghost?" It was then their friend noticed that though he couldn't see anything behind them, when he looked into his phone, which was still recording, he could clearly see a figure with shoulder-length hair, wearing a long-sleeved white dress. He couldn't see the face because of the poor lighting. He was scared stiff and for a while didn't say anything. When my friend and her SO jokingly asked, "Why is he so pale? Did he see a ghost?" He just kept telling them over and over again that he didn't feel well and that they should go back. My friend and her SO then boldly said, "Are you scared? What? There's nothing here." It was then they all heard a loud shrieking, followed by sounds of laughter from behind my friend and her SO. Needless to say, they all ran away after that. I think that video is still making its way around, last I heard. If only my phone had enough memory to store the video, then I could forward it to those who'd like to see it. I've seen it, and it's really creepy. I've heard this story from a friend in elementary school, but I remembered it recently, so I'll write it down. My memory is hazy and maybe a little wrong. A certain man, let's call him Aito. Aito rented a video from a video rental store and went home to watch it right away. By the way, Aito lived on the 2nd floor of the house. There was a greengrocer or something on the 1st floor. There was a staircase right next to the greengrocer, and the only way to go up to the 2nd floor was from there. He set up the video and quickly fast-forwarded. But no matter how much time passed, there was no preview, and the screen was always tense. Thinking that something was wrong, he tried to take out the video, and suddenly, something started to appear. What was on the screen was just a staircase. However, Aito immediately realized that it was the staircase in his house and continued to watch the screen without knowing what was going on. Then, someone came up from the stairs on the screen. However, when he looked closely, he saw that only his face was blurred and he was holding a knife in one hand. He thought it was strange, but he couldn't really help but watch it. The person slowly came up and finally reached the front door. Then, all of a sudden, he started banging on the front door. At the same time, the front door of Aito's house started making a loud noise. He got scared and took out the video in a panic. Then the sound of the knocking on the door stopped. That's it. Maybe I wrote it a little poorly. Sorry for being bad at writing. When I first heard this story, I was really scared. When I was a university student, there was a frog-faced man in the same seminar class who was a bit of an outsider. He was from Okinawa, had a strong accent, and was always dressed in a dirty manner, so everyone avoided him. One day, after a seminar class, I was complaining about the afternoon lecture being cancelled, and he invited me, saying,
"Well, why don't you come to my place? I have an interesting video."
He knew I was free after that, so I couldn't refuse, and I had no choice but to go to his lodgings. In his room, which was messy and had an indescribable stench, I was shown the video. The video begins with a young man in white briefs, tied to a pillar, screaming something. However, there is no sound, so I don't know what he is saying. By the way, it is a single shot of color footage, and sometimes the face is zoomed in. After a while, a man, presumably, wearing protective clothing and what appears to be a gas mask, appears from the left edge of the screen, carrying a cloth bag over his shoulder like Santa Claus. He then grabs a snake from the bag, shows it to the camera, and brings it close to the man in the white briefs, trying to get it to bite him. The man in the white briefs twists his body and desperately resists, and even without sound, you can hear him crying. The snake bites his shoulders, neck, and chest mercilessly, until the man in the white briefs loses control of his bladder, and then his neck dangles, as if he has lost consciousness. The man in the gas mask then approaches the screen again, makes an OK sign with his fingers, and the video ends as he seems to be checking something. After the video, the frog-faced man pipes up,
"That snake is a viper. Got it?"
looking proud for some reason. My friend loves slasher and splatter movies, and often brags about how he's watched all the horror sections of his local video rental store. His hobby has led him to start browsing online video sharing sites that show videos of crimes and similar things. And whenever we meet on the weekends, he'll always talk about the amazing videos he's seen. One day, as he was surfing the internet as usual, he found a video of a Japanese train station. The thumbnail showed a platform before the train arrived, and since it was daylight around noon, he thought, this must be a video of a person jumping in front of a train. And when he played the video, sure enough, it was a video of a person jumping in front of a train. As he was filming an oncoming train, a businessman in a suit appeared. The train suddenly brakes, and the footage ends there, which is appropriate. But my friend thought, that's it? They don't show the tracks? I thought maybe they just accidentally filmed it and posted it. So I looked at the poster's profile page and saw that they had posted over 100 videos, all of which were thumbnails of stations. I played a few of them and they were all different videos of people jumping in front of the train. They were filming a train from the platform, and someone jumped in front of the train, and the video ended there. They were all different stations and different times, but they all had the same composition and angle. There are too many. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was the same person filming, I thought. Rather than filming the train, the camera was filming from the platform, and the camera followed the person jumping, so the footage ended with the train in it. And there's no way to know in advance that someone would jump from a platform onto the tracks, even if they were a train enthusiast. Who did this? How did they film it? For what purpose? This happened last year, and I received an email from a friend I hadn't seen in a while, Shunta. I got a pretty scary DVD. Do you want to come and take a look? This friend is a horror fanatic who buys ghost stories and snuff stuff through the mail order and the internet and shows it to me. I replied, "Okay, I'll bring a few people over this weekend." So 3 of us went to his house. When I asked him, "So, what kind of thing is on the DVD?" he replied, "It's about holding people captive and subjecting them to something like psychological torture. So, take a look." I immediately played the video and was shown images that appeared to have been taken with a domestic camera, and a man in his early 30s tied to a chair. That was it. This continued on and on. We were amazed by how real it was. It wasn't any of the fake stuff we'd seen up until then. And I remember Shunta standing behind us, with his eyes glaring. After about 15 minutes, the image started to change. The man on the TV was extremely reluctant to watch, and was trying desperately not to look. And even though he was resisting, at some point he began to stare at something. His eyes were no longer those of a normal person. Then the man started to laugh out loud, yelling abuse and shaking his head. The changes in his facial expressions were not normal. They were changing at about 4 times the speed, and the things behind him were moving at a normal speed. But the man's head and above were moving at an abnormal speed and saying something. At the end, the person who was probably filming asked,
"What's your name? Do you understand?"
The man answered, "Abiya hihihi okawa o2." But his voice and mouth didn't match at all. The cameraman replied,
"Ah, this guy's no good."
and that was the end of the DVD. After watching the DVD, to be honest, we were feeling sick. Shunta was happily explaining things quickly, but to be honest, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to see any more. So the 3 of us made eye contact and decided to go home. On the way home, in the car, my companion said, when Shunta was desperately explaining, his mouth movements were strange, just like in the video. Shunta went missing, and about 2 months later, he was found to have taken his own life, completely naked. After seeing that, we began to think that we might break down too. This happened more than 20 years ago. It was during the summer vacation in my early elementary school years. I was walking home with my older cousin who had come to visit during the summer vacation. We found 3 videotapes in a vacant lot on the way home. My cousin asked me to take them home for fun, and although I didn't want to, I couldn't resist and took them home. When we got home, and my parents were at work, we played one random video on the VCR in the living room, and it showed a woman in an alleyway taking off her clothes while looking at the camera. It was a standard recording, but the picture quality was quite poor, and it seemed to be a dubbed adult video. My cousin seemed to watch it, but I said that if it was too slow, my parents would come home, so I fast-forwarded to the end. Then I played another one, but it was some foreigner having sex in some place like the Alps, and we both got nauseous and took it out right away. So I put on the last one. At the beginning it showed what looked like a real-life creep on a crowded train, and the picture quality was even worse than the other 2. I was thinking that it was boring, but suddenly the image cut off. White noise appeared, and a child was shown, walking through a bamboo forest. I stopped, fast-forwarding. She looked like a girl who was still in elementary school. The surroundings were dim. The film was being taken from behind. The girl's footsteps were unsteady, like she was about to fall or stop. Each time an adult's hand reached out from the edge of the screen to support her or push her along. No one said a word. The film continued for about 10 minutes, and my cousin and I were wondering what it was. But for some reason, we just kept watching it. Eventually, the bamboo forest ended, and we came to a wide place. The sun was shining in. Near the center, a large hole had been dug. When the girl reached the edge, 2 hands pushed her back from behind and dropped her into the hole. A foot wearing jeans appeared and pushed the dirt into the hole. The girl didn't move during that time and let the dirt cover her back. Her face was turned to the side, but it was dark and we couldn't see clearly. We were staring at the screen in silence. Looking back, we may have been frozen in shock. Finally, the soil was buried up to the edge. A pair of feet carefully stamped on it. Seeing that, I suddenly felt that something was wrong. If this continued, things would be bad. I reached out and pressed the stop button, but the image did not disappear. Oh no, this is bad. I heard a faint voice. Then my cousin, who was sitting next to me, fell forward and approached the TV. The next moment, the image seemed to rotate. The sky was projected diagonally. And then, it disappeared. "Hurry up and take it out," I shouted. And my cousin tried to take out the tape, but it was tangled inside and could not be taken out. When I pulled it out by force, the tangled tape started to stretch out. While we were panicking, my father came home and asked what we were doing and cut the tape with scissors. After that, I threw the tape back in the vacant lot. It's not that scary, but I'll drop it here. It was back in the days of videotapes, before there were DVDs. When I was a college student, there was something like a video delivery service. They would send you porn videos by a motorcycle courier. When I came home from school, I would often find some shady flies in my mailbox, and I couldn't resist my desire, so I ended up ordering one. I waited anxiously for the delivery, and the motorcycle courier finally arrived around 10 p.m. I paid the excessive amount of money, received the product, and immediately ran inside and inserted it into the deck. A black screen was shown for a while, with a slightly grainy image. There was no title, and suddenly a woman appeared. I was so surprised that I couldn't help but let out a yelp in a pathetic voice. The woman had straight hair and was a flashy woman from the bubble era. Despite her flashiness, she was expressionless, and she was staring at me from the screen, which I guess was her room. The story didn't progress at all, and even after watching for about 5 minutes, the woman just stared at me, as if she had paused. I got tired of this and started fast-forwarding the video. And then, I saw her mouth moving. I rewound the tape and played it again. Then after, she said, "This is the time 5 years ago." There was a strange noise. It was like a mix of incomprehensible noise and human voices, and the screen became distorted, and finally it turned into a static storm. I thought, what is this? Is it a defective product? Annoyed, I explained the situation to the dealer and asked them to exchange it for another tape. The dealer replied, "I understand," and hung up the phone. After that, no matter how long I waited, the dealer never came or contacted me. I was annoyed that I had been given a strange product, But I remembered the rumor that Yakuza are involved in selling these types of videos. So I never contacted the dealer again. I gave the video to a friend. After that, my friend called me and complained. What? That's not an erotic video. It's just a building or apartment, and no one is in it. When I asked him, that's weird. Did you rewind it properly? He said, of course I rewound it properly, because I didn't want to know where you jerked off. In the end, my friend also gave the tape to another friend. That friend was also an acquaintance of mine, so I asked him about the contents of the tape, and he said, a girl appeared and was lying naked on the sofa. That's all. It wasn't anything erotic at all. More like she was crying, and it was painful. It turned into a static storm within a minute. So I left it in the club room because it was creepy. I don't know what happened to the tape after that. My friend said it was gone from the club room, so someone must have taken it. Now we live in the DVD era, so no one plays tapes anymore. But I wonder if it's still out there somewhere. Maybe someone was watching it before it came to me. A different video from the one we saw. It's a creepy story that the content is different depending on who watches it. So between me and these two other friends, we call it the Wandering Tape, and still talk about it when we get together. By the way, there was no title sticker on the tape itself. Sorry it's not very scary, but it is a strange story. It's been almost 20 years since then. I graduated from college without doing much job hunting and moved to the Kanto region alone in search of work. Once I found a part-time job and was looking to make a living, I got hooked on a local TV program on a local station. I wasn't satisfied with just watching it, so I started recording the daily broadcasts on VHS and watching them over and over again. I got so hooked that I lent them to friends who lived in areas where the program couldn't be viewed and spread the word about it. The program was only 30 minutes long, but it was broadcast every weekday, Monday through Friday. After about a year of watching it, my room was piled with VHS recordings of the program. One day, when watching recorded programs had become a habit, I was watching a few days' worth of broadcasts that had been saved up for various reasons. I was doing something else and letting the VHS footage play endlessly, and about 2 hours had passed. I suddenly felt something was wrong and turned to the TV. I saw strange noise on the screen that hadn't been there before. Looking more closely, it was not so much noise as it was like an image of a channel that could not be received. There seemed to be something on that badly distorted image, but I couldn't make out what it was. There seemed to be audio, but the noise was so bad I couldn't hear it at all. Oh no, maybe I selected the wrong channel to record, I thought, as I pressed the fast forward button. After a while, the image cleared and the usual opening of the local program was displayed. I regretted missing a day's worth of broadcasts, but since I was able to record properly after that, I didn't think much of it, and after a few days I even forgot about it. At the end of the year, for the first time since I moved, I contacted my parents to tell them I was going home. I received some lucky information. My younger brother, who lives at home, seems to have installed a DVD recorder in his room. Apparently, the video deck he had been using until then is still in good condition, so if I connect the two, I can dub and edit VHS to DVD. I decided to pack up the large number of VHS tapes that I had accumulated in my room into cardboard boxes and ship them to my parents' house. I arrived safely at home, received the package that had already arrived, and immediately started dubbing in my brother's room. After checking the procedure while staring at the instruction manual, it seems that dubbing can only be done while playing the VHS video. In other words, it will take a full 2 hours to complete dubbing the video recorded on the 120-minute videotape. It will take a long time to dub all of the contents of the box that was shipped, but considering the storage space, it can't be helped. I started dubbing. However, even though 3 days had passed since I returned home and the New Year's holiday had passed, the dubbing work was progressing very slowly. This was due to a combination of various factors, such as me having to go out and my brother being stubborn and saying, "I want to play video games in my room." I only had 2 more days to stay at my parents' house for the New Year's holiday, and even if I couldn't dub all of the videos I had sent to my parents' house, I had to get as many as I could done. So that day I started dubbing when my brother went out to play pachinko in the morning. I kept changing the tape every time I finished dubbing a video, and I kept doing that for half a day. Around 6 p.m. I was eating dinner in the living room when my younger brother came home. He was about to head to his room on the 2nd floor, boasting that he had made a huge profit at pachinko. But I warned him, "I'm dubbing, so don't mess with the deck or anything." Soon after I resumed eating, I suddenly heard a scream from the 2nd floor. Then, my brother came running down the stairs in a panic. "What's that? There's something strange on the TV." I interrupted my meal and went upstairs with my younger brother. I turned off the light when I went down to the living room to eat dinner, so my younger brother's room was pitch black. In the darkness, only the CRT of the TV he was dubbing on was emitting a dim light. I almost fainted when I saw the image on the screen. In the rough picture quality, with noise here and there, the face of a woman with her eyes wide open, her mouth wide open, and her head tilted to the side was projected across the screen. At that moment, I remembered the day when the recording failed. I'd completely forgotten about it because there were no problems with the recordings from the next day onwards. But this is the videotape from that time. After watching the video in silence for a while with my brother, I suddenly came to my senses. While pretending to be calm, I said something like, "Huh? Something's gone wrong with the dubbing," and picked up the remote control for the VCR and pressed the stop button. There was no reaction. No matter how many times I pressed the button, the video did not stop. The counter on the deck was showing signs that were neither numbers nor letters, and were disappearing. The DV remote control was also unresponsive. Not only that, it did not respond to any operations, such as changing channels or pressing the power button. I pulled out the cord that was plugged into the outlet, along with the octopus plug. At the same time as a bang sound, the power went out for all the AV equipment in the room. The room, which was lit only by the light of the CRT, suddenly became pitch black, and I hurriedly turned on the lights in the room. My brother was completely upset. My heart was pounding too, but I pretended to be calm and said, "Let's eat for now," and returned to the living room. After that, it was a difficult situation. When I tried to remove the video from the deck, the tape was tangled in the head and would not come out at all. I pulled it out forcefully, but it was a struggle to remove the tape that was spat out from the deck. After somehow completing the work with a screwdriver and other things, I put all the tapes together in the trash. After that, I checked the DVD. The dubbing process must have been interrupted halfway through, but I was curious about the contents. Then, I was shocked again. The thumbnail image on the chapter screen was the face of the woman with the head tilted, which had been shown earlier. Moreover, all the images displayed in the dozens of parts were filmed with the same woman's face. I immediately pressed the eject button on the DVD deck. Unlike the video, it came out smoothly, and I snapped it in half with all my strength using both of my hands. I put it in a paper bag along with the videotape I'd thrown in the trash earlier. I folded it up small and wrapped around it with duct tape. I handed it to my mother in the kitchen saying, "Throw this away." Since then, my enthusiasm for the program that I was so addicted to has completely cooled, and I no longer record it, let alone watch it. After that, I moved again. So now I live in an area where I can't receive the station that broadcasts that program. It's also broadcast late at night on the internet or something here. So I get startled every time I casually switch channels and it matches. Emily's friend was having a slumber party for her birthday, and she invited Emily, Anna, Jody and Elise. They were mucking around, telling scary stories, making some up and real ones that they experienced. Just at the time when Jody told hers, there was a big bang at the door. They were all scared because Elise's mum and dad had gone out that night, so they were home alone. They decided to lock all doors and windows and then met back up at the room they slept in. Jody didn't come back, and when they got back, the window in that room was open. They assumed Jody went out there to try and scare them, but thinking back, Jody was the most scared of them all. They were scared. They checked out the window and no one was out there, so they locked it. They checked the whole house, downstairs, and checked up and heard screeching. They went in the room they thought it was coming from, and there was Jody, trying to shut a window that screeched when it ground along the bottom. Then it just shut, no screeching. It was as if someone or something was holding it shut. Then, the bang at the door again, 5 times. They decided to check it out. As they went downstairs, they all voted for Sarah to open it. So she did. Nothing. Then as Sarah shut it, something held it and something said,
"Let me be free."
They didn't understand it. What did this mean? They decided to let it go. Besides, they were kids. What were they going to do? No one would believe them. From that night on, they dreamt about it. But when they tried to talk about it, they just couldn't. It was strange.
My family moved to Coburg, a suburb of Melbourne, when I was only 5 years old. My bedroom was this old dining room. My sisters shared one of the front rooms, and my parents in the other room. The first night, I watched a lady with no feet glide into my bedroom, slowly fade until it reached the cupboard and then disappeared. I was frightened, but after a minute of no sound coming out of my mouth, I finally got the courage to yell out to my parents. My dad came running in, and I told him what I'd just seen. He reassured me that there was no such thing as ghosts. From then on, I knew I was on my own. He told me not to worry and go back to sleep. I slept with my back to the door from then on. The next night, I forgot about sleeping with my back to the door. And again, I watched this thing come into my bedroom, taking its usual path at least 7 times until I fell asleep. Over the nights, I just got used to it, and I was quite fascinated with what ghosts actually were. I watched it come into my room night after night. Still frightened somewhat, but no use in telling my dad. As he said, ghosts don't exist. One night, just after my dad closed my parents' bedroom door, I saw a white flash shoot across my bedroom door. I was not in the mood tonight, so I faced towards the wall so I couldn't see what was happening. That was when I noticed a light coming from nowhere. I sat up and tried to work it out, but I couldn't. I laid back down and looked at the light on the wall. It was like a perfect circle, bright as a small torch. That's when a shadow blocked some of the light. It looked almost robotic, with skinny arms reaching out to me. It opened its mouth to reveal square-shaped teeth, and I assumed, of course, it was trying to hurt me. After a minute, I finally got the sound out of my mouth to yell out to my dad. I shouted over and over. Dad came in. Same story. He just said it was my imagination. The next day, my dad thought it would be good to get me a nightlight. Big mistake, but at least he tried to help, right? That night, the nightlight went on. I faced the door in absolute fear. With the nightlight on, I could see the thing much more clearly, and it scared the hell out of me. I turned to the wall, but then I was feeling a tap on my shoulder, twice. I looked, and there she was, right there next to me. I couldn't yell, so I just pulled the blankets over my head and I faced the wall. I tried to think nice thoughts, so I said over and over again, flowers, flowers, pretty flowers, over and over in my head. I never slept with that nightlight again. I took it out of the plug. I still saw the lady in my room every night I faced that door. This happened for years, until we moved out when I was 8.
John awoke from a deep sleep, with trouble breathing, as though something had its hands wrapped around his neck. He opened his eyes to see this person who was under the covers, sitting knees first, down on top of his chest, choking his throat with their knees holding his arms down. He couldn't see a face straight away. He tried screaming for help from his wife, who was working on the computer in the adjoining room, but was unable to mutter much more than a faint murmur, due to the being's hands wrapped around his throat. After several minutes of struggling to fight this being off his body, he finally got a hand free. He used this hand to knock on the wall to attract his wife to come for help. He was able to somewhat fight this being off his body until his wife came in, and he was then able to see this being's face for the first time. It looked like a blonde female's face who had been drowned. His wife finally helped him get this being off, and as he got up to hug her and turned around, the being was gone. He got his wife to come to bed with him, and they held each other close. As John slowly dozed off again, he realized that this being was back, and that it was not his wife. He felt a surge of pressure being applied to his body by this being, as it once again tried to sit down on top of his chest. While fighting this being, he assumed he passed out. What seemed to be about 5 minutes later, he physically woke up, for real this time, threw his covers off, turned on the light, and headed straight for his wife in the next room. He told her about his experience, and she could see that he was quite shaken up about it. He asked her about things like, did she hear him scream? Did she come in to help? To which she didn't. All he could put this down to was a dream. But after reading similar stories on the net, he wondered if it could be more of a sleep paralysis syndrome. He took antihistamines before sleep, but had done so for well over 10 years now, with no previous occurrence of this at all. He had what he believed to be contact with the paranormal before, although previous times were when he was well and truly awake. Can ghosts visit in dreams? I'm not sure if this is possible, but after hearing this experience, it's freaked me out completely.
I have a bit of trouble remembering specifics of this experience, as I was young and I have tried very hard not to remember them over the years as well. This took place in Brisbane, Queensland, and my relatives still live in the house today. I was about 10 years old when my auntie and uncle and my 2 younger cousins moved into this beautiful old Queenslander in an older, more historic suburb of Brisbane. The house was huge and situated near a big old school for children with special needs, which used to be a retirement home, as we learned. There was also a newer, aged home facility directly across the road. After a couple of months after moving in, my family visited one day. My 2 cousins and I were playing in one of the boys' bedrooms when I left for a drink or something, and I came back to see my cousin sitting on the floor playing with an old, and I mean old, about 90, lady, sitting on the bed, watching him. She was as plain as day, and nothing felt strange about it. I figured she was someone from the other side of the family who I didn't know, and had entered the room whilst I was gone. It must have been about 15 or 20 minutes or so that went by, and she just sat there, watching us and occasionally talking to someone who wasn't us. Neither my cousin or I said anything to each other about her. Just figured that the other one must have known who she was. It started creeping me out that she was just watching us play and not talking. So I decided to have a chat. But when I looked up to look at her, she was not there anymore. I didn't think anything of it. It was a big room and we weren't facing her, so she could have left. Months after this, I didn't go to the house, and one day at a family get-together, my cousin told me that the lady always comes into his room or the bathroom and asks where the little blonde girl is, and that she liked her. This struck me as odd. Why wouldn't she ask my aunt or uncle? I think it was about a year or so later that I went back to the house when my younger cousin came running up to me and told me that there was someone who wanted to see me. I didn't even think it would be her, but I went in his room and, sure enough, there she was. But this time, very, very pale, and something smelled like it was starting to rot in the room. I then figured out what was going on. I was so scared, I couldn't move or talk or anything. My cousin sat down and started to play, and she just stared at me, smiling the whole time while I was frozen up against the bedroom wall. Eventually, I asked her where she came from, and she gestured towards no particular place. I asked if it was the old folks' home down the road, and she shook her head to say no. I looked at my cousin and looked back at her, and she was gone again. I asked him if he'd heard what she'd said. He had no idea what I was on about, just that some lady asked me to go to his room. That was the last any of my cousins remember seeing her. Except a few years later, my cousin has woken up and, still sleepy, heard a lady say, "You kids are all growing up now. You used to wear me out, walking all the way from the home to see you." Or something along the lines of that. After that, he asked my auntie who the old lady was in his room, and she flipped out, understandably. They still live there. Nothing has ever happened, and I am still too scared to go back there, and even more scared to talk about it with my family. I never really thought it was real until my cousin brought it up last year, which gave me a huge shock. She was a sweet old thing, I guess. I just found it strange that she never spoke to me. Just stared with those dead eyes.
One night James was in his room when he felt like something was watching him. In the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a shadow move. When he looked over to the corner of his room, he saw that it was where his bookcase was, and thought it was just his imagination. He turned the TV off and reached for the light switch so he could go to bed. There were 2 mirrors in his room on opposing walls, and one of them was very large. When he reached for the switch, he saw a shadow distinctly move in the larger mirror. When he quickly jerked his head to where the shadow might have been, he noticed the bookcase had a weird sort of dark hazy shadow to the side of it. It wasn't very noticeable, and if he hadn't seen something move near there, he probably wouldn't have noticed it. He kept focusing, and then it moved. At the same time, he got the worst headache, and it hurt so much that he felt that he had to grab his head. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them and looked at the bookcase, the shadow wasn't there anymore. He looked around his room until he finally saw it. It had moved closer to him and was becoming more noticeable. The hazy darkness had somehow gotten darker, and he could start to see the shape of a slightly bulky man. He kept his eyes on it, and it stayed put. His head was thumping, but he didn't want to take his eyes off it. Then it shrank, suddenly, to the floor. He didn't want to look down in case something sudden happened, so he stayed put. He waited for about 1.5 hours until he thought it was gone and went to turn off the light. He felt something grab his arm though, and pull at it. In his head, he suddenly thought of the words, "back moment," for no reason. He looked at the shadow and closed his eyes, thinking it would go away. It did, but when he looked around the room again, he saw it, back near the bookcase again. This time he told it to go away and leave him alone, and it quickly moved across the room near the door. There was a bottle of deodorant on the mini table near the door, and the shadow knocked it off when it moved. He turned off the light and got under the covers, and it felt like the covers were squeezing him. Like when you suck air out of a bag with something in it. He tried to move, but it felt like he was stuck, and he heard something, like an animal, dying. His bed started shaking and he fought to get free of his blanket. He managed to stick his head out and saw the shadow figure standing across the room just watching him. He could see its eyes because they were more black than the rest of it. The bed was still shaking and the covers still tight, so he closed his eyes and screamed. Then his bed stopped, the blankets became loose, and he ran out in his PJs, got in his car, and stayed at his friend's house after telling her what happened. The next day he asked one of his more religious friends to find someone to exorcise a flat, but he hadn't heard a word back yet. This happened about a month ago, and he's been at his house during the day, but at random friends' houses during the night time. He can't bear to sleep in his room anymore after what happened. This just happened maybe 10 minutes ago. I'm home with my almost 1-year-old child and my dog. My 2 older kids are at my folks' place for a few nights and have been gone since yesterday. They typically like to go stay at Grammy's about once a month or so. It's a common occurrence. So I got the baby up. The dog is laying in the entryway to the hall where the bedrooms are. The baby was focused on something and being quiet. My dog looked down the hall and kind of whined. Then I heard something that sounded like my daughter. It wasn't a whole lot of noise, but definitely a giggle, and sounds like toys moving, coming from her room. It lasted a second or two, but my dog growled at this point, while staring down the hall at the girl's room. I do need to add that my dog is wary of strangers, so he will typically growl at someone he doesn't know. So I don't think whatever this was is bad. It just startled me. I've never had this happen before while she was gone. Now my dog just keeps laying in the same spot, keeping watch. Normally something like this wouldn't weird me out as much, but this is the first mimic I've dealt with in a long time. One time I was home alone and in the backyard at my parents' house at night. At the time, I was going through it with depression and anger. To get to the point, I was laid off a job due to being type 1 diabetic. Anyway, I was in the backyard at night and heard my dad call me very clearly and opened the front door to go in. I went inside and expected to see him, but nobody was there. After that, I called his cell phone and he said he wasn't home and that he was out. A few months later, I heard my brother call me from upstairs, and he didn't respond when I replied to him. I messaged him on WhatsApp, and he said he didn't say anything. This wasn't all. Every night I'd hear someone running around on the roof atop my room, and what sounded like someone trying the door handle as if to get in. My wife even heard children playing upstairs while nobody was there. That house just gives a negative vibe. I also used to hear a woman screaming, and one time I heard it in the yard again when nobody was there. Whatever this thing is seemed to have followed me to my new home, as I was alone and heard a knocking on the door. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this. I've never really known about mimics until I just read a post on here about a Redditor hearing their child in another room. This was super alarming for me to read up about, and I have a few questions hopefully someone can enlighten me with. When I was younger, less than 10 years old, I would wake up in the middle of the night,
or even be chilling in my room and we hear my dad aggressively yell my name. And as I would go out to ask if they called for me, it would usually be a no. I always thought it was my head playing games, but for something to sound so real and terrifying, like I was in trouble, haunted me. During this time in my life, I would also experience terrible nightmares that seemed very physical. My room is the first room of the only hallway in a very small house. This, I wouldn't even call it a dream, would happen multiple times a month for years. I could be dreaming of anything good or bad, whatever, and I'd hear aggressive running / stomping down the house, coming towards me. It would swing open my door and almost felt like it jumped on me, or as I said as a child, felt like big sacks of flour being thrown on my back. And it was always when I was laying with my back towards the door. And as I'd turn around, my door was closed as if nothing happened. But I felt it. As I started to grow a little, I would experiment and would cover the back of my head and ears with a blanket, thinking if they didn't see me, they'd leave me alone. It cut down, but didn't stop completely. It's done now, and I can't remember the last time I've experienced a problem with that, or something similar. So I know it wasn't sleep paralysis. Any tips, or anybody possibly know what the hell it was that traumatized me by sleeping with my back away from the door? I think there's a mimic in my house, but I need clarification. I'm not sure where else to post this. If I've made a mistake, please direct me to the right page. Google has been no help. For some background, this is a fairly new house. I'm not sure if that matters, but it's only been lived in for about 6 months and never had any other strange occurrences. My boyfriend has just gone to shower whilst I was in my room, and my mum was in the kitchen cooking dinner. I heard voices coming from the bathroom, which is right next to my bedroom, and I assumed he'd been watching videos on his phone whilst showering. My mum yells out, "Are you two showering together?" And I reply, "No." I walk out my door and ask my boyfriend if he's on his phone, and he says no. He gets out of the shower and asks who kept knocking on the bathroom door, and both my mum and I are confused. No one knocked on his door. He then told us he thought my mum knocked on the door of the bathroom and asked, "Who was that you were talking to?" right outside the door. He called out to me after he heard this and asked if my mum was talking to me or him. She was in the kitchen the whole time and had only yelled out after she heard a female talking. So my boyfriend thought it sounded like my mum talking, and my mum said it sounded like me. I can't exactly recall what or who the voice sounded like, just I know it was a woman. We're all a little freaked out, so I turned to Google about it, and no help. Can mimics sound like 3 different people at once to different people? Or could it have been something else? Edit. I wanted to add, we'd just visited my boyfriend's parents' house the day prior, who have quite a lot of spiritual activity. Could it be that something followed us home? Is that even possible? This happened a couple of months ago. My brother and I had recently started rewatching The Sopranos and were hooked all over again. We'd often marathon watch episodes and even test each other on the silliest little things like what colour undershirt Tony was wearing, or what colour shoes Paulie's wearing. You know, silly little things like that. It became our weekend ritual, something that kept our sibling bond strong amidst our otherwise hectic lives.
The particular Saturday in question, my brother decided to head out to a friend's birthday party. Initially, I thought about tagging along, but I couldn't tear myself away from the TV long enough to stop watching The Sopranos. Plus, I kind of enjoyed the thought of having the living room all to myself. About an hour into my binge session, as the tension in the episode was peaking, I heard my brother's voice calling me from the kitchen.
Hey, come check this out.
He yelled, his tone excited and a bit impatient, just like when he thought he discovered something I didn't catch. At that moment, it didn't strike me as odd. It felt right, almost comforting, that he'd want me to discuss a plot twist. I paused the show and walked into the kitchen, expecting to see him maybe standing by the fridge with a triumphant grin he gets when he's got something good to share. But the kitchen was dark, illuminated only by the streetlight filtering through the small window. The eerie emptiness started to sink in, and a shiver ran down my spine as I stood there, rooted in confusion. Shaking it off, I texted him, playfully accusing him of trying to prank me while out with friends. Moments later, my phone buzzed with his response. "I'm out right now. What are you talking about?" That's when the chill really hit me. I knew he was out, consciously understood it, and yet the voice I heard was unmistakably his. For the rest of the night, I tried to rationalize what happened. Maybe I was just so entrenched in the storyline that I imagined it. Or perhaps the show was getting to me more than I thought. But the experience left me unnerved. Then I started piecing things together, remembering those odd occasions when I thought I heard footsteps in the hall, or the faint sound of conversation when no one was home. It all seemed innocuous before, but now it felt different, more sinister. So each time I find myself alone in the living room now, there's this underlying tension. It's hard to ignore. My brother jokes that I should write a story about it, maybe turn our house into the next horror movie plot. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that maybe it's not all in my head. Maybe there is something in our house watching me in the silence. Each time I hear something out of place, I remind myself it might be just this old house playing tricks. But then again, maybe it's something more. Anne's father worked as a park ranger, and they lived in modest housing near the national park which he was employed at. She never knew how old the house was, but she always had an uneasy feeling, as if she was being watched there, never truly alone. Growing up in that house, she was often afraid, sensing something was going to happen, a feeling that seemed to bother her more than anyone else. She sensed something was there, even if no one else did, or at least no one else acknowledged it. The first sensation she had in that house was of someone watching her while she slept. She would wake up with the feeling of her forehead tingling, as though someone was staring daggers at her. Looking around revealed no one, so she began to sleep with her face covered. Strange noises throughout the house would feed her paranoia and fuel her wild imagination. Eventually, she started sleeping with her parents, until around the 4th grade. One night, she awoke feeling unusually scared, more so than usual. She wanted to sleep in her parents' room, but they had locked the door. Sitting in the hallway, she decided she wouldn't be afraid anymore, and resolved to go to bed. If something happened, it happened. She turned off the hallway light, left her bedroom door open, lay beside her sister in the queen bed, and covered her face. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard someone calling her name in a familiar voice. Sitting upright, she expected to see her sister beside her talking in her sleep, but her sister remained silent, asleep next to her. It couldn't have been her. She would have felt her move or speak. She got up, turned on the light, and listened for any further sounds. But the house was quiet. The hallways closed doors, revealing no one up or about. If it had been anyone else, she would have heard them. The house betrayed even the slightest movements with its squeaky floors, loud doors, and rusted hinges. She resolved to leave the light on but shut the door, calming herself by praying until she fell asleep. The first time she experienced something truly chilling was during winter. The family couldn't afford propane, so they all slept in the same room with heaters. The kids on the mattress on the floor, and the parents on the bed. One night she awoke to the sound of her mother's voice, calling softly for her from near the window. The voice urged her to come closer, but she shook her head no, feeling that something was off. She noticed the quiet breathing from where her mother slept, confirming her presence in bed. Trembling, she squeezed her eyes shut and tried not to listen to the mimic until her parents stirred awake. With the light on, she had a meltdown. Her young mind just couldn't comprehend what had happened. She couldn't sleep again until the morning light. As time passed, the incidents continued. Muffled conversations would echo from empty rooms, sounding eerily similar to the family's usual discussions. Sometimes she heard her own voice calling from the basement, or her father's voice at the front door when he was clearly out at work. One evening, while doing homework, she distinctly heard her little brother call her from outside. Checking the window, no one was there, and her brother was playing on the floor in the living room. The most disturbing occurrence happened one quiet afternoon. Alone in the house, she heard her mother's voice in the kitchen, speaking casually, as if preparing a meal or chatting about the day's events. A soothing, familiar noise. But stepping into the kitchen revealed only silence and emptiness. Eventually, the rest of the family started to experience these voices. They continued, growing more and more each day, until the very day that they packed their belongings and moved away. All occurrences of voices being mimicked ceased once they settled into their new home. This has happened to me multiple times, especially when I was younger. But every now and then it happens again. It used to be my father's voice, but now it has switched to my child's voice. I remember one incident from when I was younger, hearing my father shout my name in a rage, as if I was in trouble for something. This was unusual because it was 5:30 a.m. I got up in a panic to see what I had done wrong, only to find the house silent. I went to check on my father, gingerly opening his bedroom door, only to find him dead asleep and snoring loudly. My blood ran ice cold, and I hurriedly went back to bed, figuring it must have just been an ultra-realistic dream. I heard his voice call my name numerous times around the house, only to find that he was either asleep, watching TV, or not in the house at all. Recently, my child has moved into his own room. I've heard him speak several times, except it's never actually him. It even happened while he's sitting right next to me. I've heard his voice, asked him to repeat himself because I didn't quite catch what he said, only for him to tell me he never said anything at all. Oddly enough, this has never happened whilst I've been directly looking at the person whose voice I'm hearing. It's never on a loop, meaning that it isn't a residual haunting. It doesn't follow any pattern or purpose. It's just completely random and out of the blue. This doesn't happen every day, but it is fairly common. Like I'd say once or twice every couple of months. Am I being followed by something? Or do I have some kind of attachment? What do you think?
So basically, my house is haunted to some degree. But a couple of days ago, my sister and her boyfriend came inside. Sister, we heard something weird out there. Me, what do you mean? Sister's boyfriend. It was like someone saying, "Awoo?" Like a dog howling, so I did it back. And it did it back to me. Fast forward to today. Literally maybe an hour ago, I'm outside calling my cat to come in because where we live, we have a lot of coyotes, and I didn't want him staying outside all night until he gets bigger. I'm standing there calling him. Echo, Echo. And a couple of yards away from me, I hear what sounds like a person say, meow. I'm not entirely up to date on my knowledge of demons or spirits, but I've heard of mimic demons pretending to be humans and mimicking their voices. But this voice wasn't somebody I recognized. Any thoughts? I made a post earlier about a recent encounter with some sort of mimic, and I said I'd make a post about why I know or believe my house is haunted. Instance 1. I was probably like 13 at the time. We had just moved to my house and my family went out to eat, but I didn't really want to since it was late and I don't like eating too late. This means it was just me in the house. I was sitting down on the sofa with my cat, watching a movie, when, out of nowhere, I heard a man's voice behind me say,
"Here, kitty, kitty."
My cat didn't seem to acknowledge it any, but I heard it clear as day, and when I turned around, nobody was anywhere to be found. Instance 2. Probably about the same age. I had what I believed to be a trickster demon of some sort around, as I would trip over seemingly nothing and hear laughter right next to me. I would also place things down in my bedroom, only to find them gone, nowhere to be found when I went back for them. Obviously, my first instinct was that my siblings had taken them, but nobody had gone into my bedroom besides me. Eventually, I would just say, "Could you put my item back, please? Thank you." And suddenly, it would be back exactly where it was before. Instance 3. Probably about a year or two later, so I was maybe 14 or 15. I was going to go up to the mountains behind my house for a hike, but it was dry season, so all the prickly bushes and such were all over the hill. So I turned around to go back home. As I'm walking back home, I hear indistinct talking, and then what sounds like somebody muttering through a megaphone. It sounded like they were right in front of my house. Definitely would have been heard from inside, so I ran inside and asked my mother what the noise was. What noise? Instance 4. About 3 months ago, so I'm 18 at the time, my grandfather had gotten sick in another country and wasn't doing too great. My mother had this weird feeling that he was lost. I had gone into the den of my house and started pacing a little bit because I have anxiety, and that's what helps me not panic. As I'm walking, I see out of the corner of my eye somebody following me. Feet behind mine, glimpses of a face when I turn, but only ever out of the corner of my eye, never in full sight. Instance 5. About a week ago actually, my mother, sister and I, coincidentally the only people in my house that believe in the supernatural, were standing near the fireplace, talking about whether or not my mother was going to buy my grandfather's ashes from the funeral home in another country. All of a sudden, we heard a very loud bang on the wall, and my mother's mailbox where she keeps letters and bills and such fell to the floor. It was nailed into the wall. The only things that fell out were her checkbook, a pen, and a few old credit cards. Guess my grandfather really wanted her to pay for him.